Do you ever feel really frustrated by the fact that you can't communicate with your partner or you're not being heard or understood by your partner and you're deciding, you know what, there's something else that I need to do. So you start looking outside of yourself, you start asking people questions, and you never really get to where you want to go because no one really understands what you're trying to say and what you're
Mhm.
trying to communicate. It is amazing how many of us struggle to communicate in our relationships, in our life in general. And today, Walter and I are going to dive into what is communication? How do you communicate effectively with your partner? And how is it that you can start to connect better and understand them so they can understand you? Walter, thank you so much for joining me again today. It is such an honor and a pleasure. As always,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
you're welcome. So today, again, we're talking about how is it that you communicate with your partner. So I think the first thing we want to do is define what communication actually is, not what so many of the people that we work with tell us they think it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So this is a big thing, right? Because it's, there's so often we're told, well, you have to talk. You have to talk, and that's communicating. And it's like, well, is it really?
Mhm.
Let's hear your thoughts.
Well, first, it's like I think people don't even realize how important this is to a relationship until you start diving into it. Like when we get into like goal setting, when I do my couple stuff, it always comes up. We want to work on better communication, right? So it's like, what does that mean? So unfortunately, people think it's just talking. It's like, oh, I tell him hit this and I tell her that and I do this and I say this and I say this. But it's like, okay, but talking is one aspect, but what about tonality? What about body language? What about the actions you take with what you say or behind what you're saying? There's so many forms of communication that, or like a lot of people now like to text and they don't even want to do face to face. So it's like how you write things and how you text things, and it goes a lot deeper than just what you just said verbally. And I think that's where it gets miscommunicated right there with
Uh,
that, right? So
yeah. And that's the thing, right? Well, what we've been taught is that talking is communicating.
Mhm.
And just simply talking to someone is not communicating because are they actually hearing you? Are they hearing what you're saying? Are you connected to them? Do you have their undivided attention?
Mhm.
And are you so when you start to communicate or when you start to talk, like you said, I told him, I told her, and you start to tell people, and now you're talking down. You're almost, when you tell somebody something, and it's like, I'm telling you, you're almost talking down to them.
Mhm.
And if you're talking down to somebody, who wants to listen to that?
Nobody.
No. So it doesn't matter how much you told them, how much you told them. Now they're going, well, I'm not listening to that.
Yeah.
All you do is da, 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 you're just talking at me, and I can't. Uh, I can't. I'm frustrated, and then this is where things start to spiral out of control.
Yeah.
So what have you seen? What have I know like you worked with a lot of people. I worked with a lot of people that have this same problem. And it comes down to very basic things, yet they get missed.
Yeah. So I think um, the misnomer here is that men struggle with communicating and women are better at it, which is not necessarily true. The only thing that's true is that women say almost double the words a man says in a day speaking. So they confuse that as communication, like you mentioned, right? So it's like it's understanding what communication is and knowing the right time to deliver certain things and where does this go. That's the other part. And then I honestly learning how your partner takes information and how they need to be communicated to. And then you as a partner, are you being present and are you listening? Because majority of people are waiting for the other person to finish so they can say what they want to say.
They aren't even
They're actually
listening.
not present. They're not. So those are some common things I've been. seeing people struggle with.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Women typically say that they're better at communicating. And like I said earlier, when we were talking before, is that women are better talkers.
Yeah.
They're better at talking, effectively communicating, not as much as they might think,
Yeah.
right? And it's not a knock on it. It's just a matter of there's just some slight changes that need to happen.
Hmm.
Because if you're talking at somebody versus talking to somebody, those things are vastly different.
Yeah.
What is the difference between talking at somebody and talking to somebody?
Well, I think talking at somebody is just saying all the things you just want to say, probably screaming or being angry. Um, that's kind of how I would take it. Instead of like, listen, we need to talk, and talking with the intention of getting a point across and getting a result. There's a difference. Instead of just being, you should do this, and it becomes the blame game. There's judgment thrown around, and then one person or both even people could be like disrespected or start to shrink, and they feel like, okay, this doesn't feel good, and then they're not going to take in anything you said anyways, and block it all, and then they're going to refrain themselves from wanting to communicate with you because then they don't want a strip ripped off them. It doesn't lead to a good path, and it's going to affect it further and further down the line in a relationship.
Well, yeah, no good comes from that when you're talking at somebody, right?
No.
I told you the other day that you should do this, this, that, and the other. I wanted you to do this.
Mm-hmm.
The problem lies within, did they hear you? Or are they used to you just barking at them?
Yeah.
Right? And it goes both ways. Men and women both do this.
Yeah.
So how does someone get in touch? How does somebody talk to someone? So let's say a man's talking to his wife.
Yeah.
What is something that he could say to her that's going to have her actually be like, "Oh, wait, he's actually talking to me."
Yeah. I it's funny because I feel like, again, a thing that men struggle with communicating with women, they make everything factual when someone in their feminine, when the woman's in her feminine, it's very sometimes that doesn't penetrate their mind either. You need to learn how to shift their emotions and know how to talk to them to pivot their emotions. And you're going to get a lot more out of them when they're not in the state of especially if they're on a lower vibrational state, which is stress, anger, frustration, depression, any of those type of emotions. If you learn how to pivot them through communication and talking and whatever makes them shift their emotions, you're better off doing that first, then being logical or more more like logical. Logical is probably the best word with what you have to deliver in terms of the communication.
Hmm.
Women are different. Guys are more logical. So for a woman, I try to be like, you need to drop facts. Like one of the clients I had was saying, like, oh, I text my man, oh, how are you feeling? And I'm like, oh, what do you feel about this? And I'm like, that doesn't resonate. What do you
Yeah.
think about this, honey? And she's like, oh, right. That it's a better form of communication when that woman is texting her man.
Right.
And he responded much better when she would say, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? He said, how do you feel about this?
Hmm.
It just didn't resonate with him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing though. But you have to meet somebody where they're at.
Agreed.
So again, right? It's being able, and that's connecting.
Yeah.
Just
And everyone's
talking
at
to
different, yeah. So
yeah,
it's going to vary from person to person for sure.
absolutely. So how do you connect with someone? Is meeting them where they're at. So like you said, if somebody's in an emotional state and their emotions are showing, they're coming out, and you try to talk to them as a matter of fact, it's
Yeah.
very difficult for them to even fathom what you're saying.
Yeah.
But if you meet them and it's like, okay, I understand that you're feeling that way. Can you help me understand that more? Why, what is it that you're feeling, or how is that coming out? What is that to
Mhm.
you? Right? Because to me, it's something completely different.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
what is it that's making you feel that way? Or like, there's so many ways to take this. But again, it's meeting them where they're at
Yeah,
and
and the
then
other thing,
trying to go forward from there.
yeah, and I think, and me and Mike do this really well. It's like we might start with a question, but it leads to more questions, and it's the right questions to ask that's going to get you a lot further in the communication, right? Like what you just said, right,
Mhm.
right there. So it's just like, see them where they're at, and say, how can I help you? How can I serve you? How can, whatever. Like, how can I help you on this journey? Where are you? Like, because you'll know your partner better than we know them, right? So it's just like, cool. If they're in an emotional state, you'll know that.
Mhm.
Then you'll know it's like, okay, I got to meet them there, and then shift. Like again, if they're more, too emotional, then you got to shift their emotions. Then you can drop the logic.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's there's a lot to it, that's for sure. But that's the best way to do it. Meet them where they're at, for sure.
And this is the starting point, right? It's like, again, we go further into this into our paid programs. We go way, way deeper into this. But just to get yourself going and just to start coming from a place of understanding the other person. So I was telling Walter off camera before we got started here that I worked with a guy who's been married over 20 years and his wife was really struggling with something and she's not doing well. Her health is suffering, and he was just doing all of these things to try and help her, right?
Mhm.
And yet nothing he ever did was good enough. Nothing
Mhm.
he ever met. So what did he feel? He felt defeated.
Sure.
He didn't know what was going on. He's like, I'm doing all of this stuff. I'm completely stressed out. I don't know what's happening.
Mhm.
I said to him, just ask her this simple question. What do you need from me right now? How can I best support you?
Yeah.
20 plus years, he's never asked her that question. And he's been spinning his wheels.
Hmm.
So, what's the difference between him trying to figure everything out or him asking, what do you need from me right now? How can I best support you? That's the difference between talking at somebody and meeting someone where they're at and connecting to what their needs are.
Hmm.
It's really a simple concept, but this takes, taking a step back and taking it out of yourself, I think. Like,
Agreed.
stop making it about you and make it about the other person.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to start it too, because it's like, okay, you recognize we need to work on communication. It's great. And you reckon now you've broken down that, okay, it's not just talking. There's different forms of communication and how you deliver the information and how you receive the information. Cool. But then it's like, okay, now don't make it so personal about you and make it about like an attached outcome. It's being about the other person and letting it flow. Right. And I think that's beautifully said. I think that's very important. And that's a good starting point.
Yeah. I mean, just that alone
Huge.
took his stress level from 1,000 down to 3
Yeah, that was
because
huge.
she actually said, thank you. And here's
Mhm.
what I need from you.
Yeah.
It took all of the other stuff away from him.
Hmm.
He didn't have to do all of the stuff that he thought he had to do, spinning
Yeah.
his wheels, driving himself crazy, all that stuff happening. But that's the thing, right? It's so that's your starting point,
Hmm.
is meeting someone where they're at and just asking a simple question is, what do you need from me?
Yeah.
That it's really, that's your starting point.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. I think like, what do you need from me? What are we creating? What are we doing? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
start talking, like asking deeper questions. Right. And, asking like what do I need to improve? Like asking your partner that is huge, or them asking you is like, what do you think I need to improve on it? And delivering it kindly, right? Like you don't have to rip the person apart either, because everyone needs stuff to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that coming from a place of love, I think there's a lot of possibility for growth as two individuals and as a couple.
Mhm. Absolutely. And the other thing too is to further that point is talking about the things that you do like about the person,
Hmm.
right? The things that they do bring to you or they do for you or just the person that they are. I
Yeah.
mean, we talk a lot about doing, right? It's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, thank you for doing that." Or you didn't do that.
Hmm.
But what we don't really talk about is the person as a being. You're a human being.
Hmm.
So what kind of person are you?
Yeah.
Right? Thank you for being an amazing person. Thank you for being a great wife. Thank you for being a great husband. Thank you for being a great boyfriend, a great girlfriend. Thank you for being you.
Hmm.
Like you're an amazing person. If you saw what I see, it's huge.
Hmm.
What is that? And when someone is appreciated for being somebody, being who they are, and they might not think too much of it because that they're just being themselves.
Sure.
But when they're appreciated for being themselves, the difference is huge.
Yeah, for sure.
You,
And I
you
find I find the thing is too, it's like we're so focused on what the person is, what we think they're lacking or what's not working, instead of focusing on what's really good about the person and the relationship and what's going on and everything around you. So yeah, that's huge. That's huge because that needs to be communicated for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Especially if the person's an affirmation person, they that's their main love language.
yeah,
And if that's their main love language and you're not communicating that well, you're asking for a terrible relationship or it's going to end,
yep. And
right?
even if it's not being appreciated for being who you are, it's a big deal. And because
Absolutely.
we've been beaten down. People are beaten down. The shit has been beaten out of you.
Hmm.
And when that happens, you don't feel really good about yourself,
For sure.
as much as you want to and you think you do. But when someone compliments you for being yourself, for being a great person, for whatever,
Hmm.
you know,
Feels good.
it does.
Yeah,
It's like I don't need recognition, but it is nice when I do get it.
for sure. And there's
And
nothing wrong with
nothing.
like it all to me, it just resonates with your soul. It feels good.
It
You
does.
feel appreciated, right? So there's nothing wrong with that at all. And I
No,
think
and
there should be more of that in all sorts of relationships, but especially romantic ones.
yeah. Yeah, I have friends who I've said thank you for being.
Hmm.
Thank you for being a great friend. Thank you for doing or being this. Thank you for doing that. But it's after the who they are,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it makes a world of difference. Um,
Hmm.
it can that just that alone can take someone from a dark place into a much lighter place.
For sure.
It does
It's huge.
wonders for me. So as you start to look at your relationship, you look at yourself, figuring out what you need, how you want to express yourself, what you need for how you need to be talked to. All of this is just starting your foundation. Because without a foundation, I mean, you can't, it's hard to go anywhere else.
Yeah. You need to
And
build up.
yeah, I mean, exactly. If and again, right, we're talking about how to connect with a person because everything in relationships is the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's your marriage. It doesn't matter if it's your best friend. It doesn't matter if it's a person you just met in the grocery store.
Yeah.
All communication has the same foundation in all relationships.
Yep. And yeah. And if you become a better communicator, I'm telling you, like you said, it'll improve all relationships, but it'll improve even like business, it'll improve like work, relation, everything.
Everything.
It's just people will gravitate to you just because you communicate that much better.
Yeah.
It's very
It,
powerful.
it is very powerful. So as we start to wrap this up, we're starting into that place of let's do something different than what we've been doing.
Mhm.
Because what we've been doing hasn't been working. Let's just try this.
Yeah.
And I promise you, if you just try one of the things that we're talking about, it will start to make significant changes in your relationship, in your communication, and connecting to your partner.
Mhm.
So, Walter, that's it, man. As we wrap up, what are your last few thoughts on what we were just talking about?
Well, I hope when people watch this video, at least it sparks thought,
Yeah,
right? And that it makes you think, you know what? I wonder how our communication in my relationship is. Or if you're even if you're single, whatever, and you're desiring a relationship or your other relationships, and you're thinking, am I a good communicator? Am I a good listener? Do I receive the information well? Am I open, or am I just sitting there waiting for my turn? So just do some evaluation and be like, are you a good communicator? Are you a good listener? And is your partner a good communicator? Are they a good listener? And what do you think needs to improve in your communication? And if you're not sure, this is where me and Mike can come into to play too.
absolutely. I think that's a good place to start. Is it's also to ask, how do you ask your partner, right? How do you feel that I listen to you? Do you feel that I'm listening to you?
Yeah, do you feel heard?
Do you feel heard? Do you feel that I'm paying attention to you and I actually understand you?
Yeah.
And when you ask that question, be prepared for whatever is going to come at you, because it could be a shitstorm, or it could be coming from a calm place. Hopefully it comes from a calm place, but be strong enough to take whatever it is that they say to you,
Absolutely.
and be understanding of, maybe they're coming from a frustrated place, or they may not know where they are. They're just frustrated and overwhelmed, or they might be happy that you're actually asking that question and saying, "Oh my God, here we go. Let's get into this," right? So starting from that place, right, and allowing someone to just express. I think starting from there, that's just a great place to start, and being open to whatever comes your way, and then saying, "Okay, now let's work on this together." That's it. All right,
Perfect.
guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and that is it for today. And we will talk to you next time. Bye bye.